Welcome to Next Up with NextGen, the podcast bringing you insights and perspectives from the next generation of leaders in the American Council of the Blind. Brought to you by ACB Next Generation.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Next Up with NextGen. My name is Greg Lindberg, and I am the current chair of the ACB Next Generation Publications Committee. Here on this episode, we are featuring a recording from a Tuesday Night Huddle event, and the topic of discussion is job interviews, and more specifically, navigating a job interview as someone who is blind or visually impaired. So let's go ahead now and turn things over to Lindsay Lavier. Lindsay, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight for ACB Next Generation's event on mock interviews. Tonight's event is sponsored by ACB Next Generation. And if you'd like to learn more about ACB Next Generation, do check out our website at acbnextgeneration.org. I am Lindsay Lavier, and my other co-facilitator for tonight is Joey Couch. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our presenter, who is Moe Carpenter. Tonight's session is designed to provide tips, strategies, and real-life world insights on navigating the interview process. Our event will be broken down into two segments. The first one will focus on interview fundamentals. Segment 2 will cover behavioral and situational interview techniques. Each segment will include a short Q&A session. So let's get started, and I will let Moe introduce herself, and then we will get started.
Hi, everybody. I'm Moe Carpenter. I am not a professional interviewer or a recruiter of any sort. I just want to be upfront about that. I am an AFC, which is an accredited financial counselor. So, of course, gaining a job and doing the whole job process is very closely tied to your finances. And therefore, it's something that I'm interested in, but it's not exactly one of my specialty topics. If you were here earlier this year, I did do a thing more about doing the process of cover letters and resumes, and that was more from a lot of my experiences and also some research that I'd done. I didn't quite have that much time to prep for this evening, so a lot of this is going to hopefully be my experiences, and I want you to feel free to share your experiences as well, as we can always learn from one another in the do's and don'ts, and probably some conversations that we're not used to talking about when you see generalized interviewing information that's out there, since a lot of that is going to be for fully abled individuals. And we always get that topic of whether we disclose and when to disclose that come up. So I'm hoping that we kind of dabble into some of that, even though I know it's not on Lindsay's outline, but it is part of what I think is important here in the interview process, since that probably is going to be the first time that you actually are face to face with individuals and might not have a clue up to that point that you have a visual disability. So that's kind of a little bit about me, a little bit about why we're here and what's going on tonight. And Lindsay, why don't you go ahead and continue on?
Oh, all right. There's actually some questions, if I haven't missed anything, to sort of start out with the first segment of in regards to the interview. The first question being, what are the most important steps that candidates should take when preparing for an interview? Would be the first of these questions to start us out
Right.
with.
So let me give me a chance to tab over to my notes here. So one of the big things, and you will notice that this is something that you would probably have done in the resume and cover letter writing part of the program. But one of the biggest things that we're going to focus on is you want to know about the company that you're interviewing with, whether it be a company for a job, whether it be for an organization. I was thinking about, we have DKM and JP fellow applications that will be due roughly in the first half of next year. I think they're usually due about April 1st. So that's just right after that first quarter. And that might be the first time a lot of individuals really face an interview situation. And so thinking about knowing what you're going for, the company behind it. So really know what is their focus, what is the stuff that they do, because that will help you have the most ground in the application and interview process, is just knowing who you're speaking to, because the more you can connect with them, the better off your experience is going to be. So you want to learn about the company, and then you want to really refresh yourself on what it is that you're going for. If it were a job, go over those key points that they were looking for in the job description, and look for the things that you specifically said that you were good at, and make sure that you know how to best describe those particular items as they come up. You also want to know what is expected for that particular job. So kind of, not that you'll have the ins and outs of how that particular process happens at that particular company, but knowing if you were going into a job for marketing, knowing that they do social media a lot of the time, and that they do need somebody who is able to keep on social media trends, and just the ins and outs of how to connect with other businesses and things. You just kind of want to know the outline of what you're expected from just the general job points. And then make sure that you've really rehearsed, and kind of, not that you want to sound over rehearsed. I know that comes up a little later in these questions, but you really want to make sure that you know your answers to the questions and how you can best fit that into what they're looking for, and be able to bend that in different directions depending on how the questions are asked of you. You also may want to keep in mind what things you might need when you are looking at applying for a job, or any accessibility kinds of questions that might come up. And so if you need a particular program in order to actually do the job, make sure you've researched. And so when you go into the job interview process, you can say, I use this particular program. It runs about this for a company to purchase, and have all those answers ready for the potential employer. Because a lot of times people get tripped up when they go into those things, and they're like, well, how are you supposed to do this job if you can't see the screen? And people get flustered because they know that these things are out there, but they haven't done the research quite to know exactly how to present that out into the rest of the world.
William
And then
had his hand up. I don't know when you were going to be.
We'll get to you in a minute, William. I think I have one or two more points here. So you want to also kind of think about when you are going to disclose, and if you are going to disclose your disability. I know when I've done things, and this is when I'm working with sighted individuals, I've done a lot of Zoom meetings where I might meet with a new client, and they might not know that I have a disability. So often I walk into there and just put it right on the table. I will say things like, you will notice that I do not have my camera on, and that is because I can't see my background. And so I want it not to be a distraction for you, and therefore I have chosen to keep my camera off. And if it is fine for you, you can also keep your camera off, because I don't want that to be a distraction for me to have any kind of flurries on the screen, if that is okay with you. And making sure that that is okay with them before you continue on the process. Again, this is from kind of a flip, but even when I've kind of am getting new clients, it is still an interview process all in the same, because I am trying to make sure that I fit their needs as well as they fit my needs. A little different kind of interview, but also in that process. Another thing is you want to make sure that you look the part when you do these job interviews. I know sometimes we think we're not on screen. What does that matter? But if it's even a electronic one where you do have your camera on, and there are ways that you can do things with a camera and have the camera tell you if you're in frame, tell you if you are centered. And so those are good things to keep in mind when you are looking at. But just dressing up for the part and making sure that you look the part that you're trying to apply for really gives yourself a boost in your self-esteem, which will help you present better out to the employer. I have one more. Oh, no, I think that's it. So go ahead to question 2, Joy.
Oh, there we go. It helps when you're unmuted.
Or do you want to get William's hand? I guess.
Let's go ahead and do Williams, because you have actually covered question 2 in this first section for the most part. So we'll go ahead and see what William has for us, and we'll go on from there.
Good evening, everyone. So it's one of the key things that I will often look for in a company is knowing the company that you're applying for. But of course, well, you've already covered it, but I've only had one job, in my life, and I recently got laid off due to there not being enough work for the production workers, for the employees. So knowing the company that you're applying for, and I think being upfront and being honest about your visual impairment is very important. Thank you.
And that's really going to be a comfortability. So some individuals are very upfront with those things, and because it's a little more obvious, but some other individuals, they can't legally ask you about your disability. They can only ask about it in reference to how you can still perform the job. And so it becomes a real gray area, and it's always up to everyone's individual interest on when they disclose and if they disclose.
Okay, and this next question will be, I think, a fairly quick question. And that is, what are common mistakes that people will make during early interviews, sort of like when you do your first interview? And so the reason I think this question was put in was due to the fact that and I think this got addressed in the process of Moe's first thing. When you go to interviews, obviously make yourself presentable, even if it is a web interview. Still dress up as if you were going in person, for example. And she did cover, get to know the company, get to know what they do, how their processes work as best you can from the website and so forth. And have your questions ready, as well as answers to any questions that they may ask you. Try to be as prepared as you can for those. And if you don't know, just, I don't know, but I can learn more and get back to you with the information. And because I didn't realize we'd answer that question, I didn't read it all the way through. And the next question is, how should a candidate handle a question that they do not know how to answer?
So some things that you want to remember when we're looking at not knowing how to answer questions is it's always okay to say, I'm not really sure, and ask them to restate the question, and just to make sure, and always think about rephrasing what they're asking you to see if you're grasping the information they're looking for. And sometimes this can be for questions that are just really odd and strange. And a big key thing to keep in mind is they're not really looking for the best perfect answer to some of these strange off the wall questions. They're actually looking for your thought process and how you actually go through the process of combating a problem. And so things that are kind of off the wall questions like, if you were a book, what book would you be? Or those kinds of things that are just kind of strange and out there. They're just really looking for the person that you are and really expanding on who you are and if you fit into their culture and the things that they're looking to hire, and not necessarily what is the best answer that I can come up with for this job. But it's always fun to kind of think about, if you did get asked one of those weird questions, what kind of answer would you come up with, so that you are kind of prepared in a way to answer that question without having a super rehearsed answer for them. I hope that kind of answered it, Joey.
I think it had. I think it did.
Oh, and another key thing is to always remember that if it's something that you're not used to, and maybe they ask you a question like, are you familiar with this particular software? Like, are you familiar with JAWS? And you can say, well, I haven't used JAWS personally. I use NVDA, which is a similar program. I am aware of JAWS, and I am happy to learn more about that particular program if it is needed in this particular job position.
As we go on down through, the next question, of course, is what strategies make for good impressions, especially when you get involved with virtual interviews?
So that being on time factor, I know sometimes our lives get crazy and hectic, and we sometimes just think that showing up right on the dot is the best thing, but always show up a little early. Be prepared when you show up to that interview. You want them to know that you are eager to be here, that you are just energized and enthusiastic about what you're doing, and that you're ready for this interview. If you are nervous, there's differing opinions on, oh, well, I'm kind of stating that right up front. Sometimes that can be seen as a way to connect with individuals, to kind of humanize the situation. And other times it can be really thought of as something where you're kind of admitting your weaknesses. And that's not always kind of comfortable for the employer or the person that's interviewing you. And so those are things you kind of want to gauge the room. But if you're noticeably nervous, it might be worth saying, maybe I'm out of practice. And so I wanted to make sure I was on time, and just, keep it very, very simple. Don't go into a huge story, but just make sure that they know that you are there and that you are engaged and ready to go when the interview starts. Sometimes these interviews get pushed back a little depending on what else is happening in the day. So it's always best to be early and be on time and be ready to go, even if they don't get there right away. You also want to be able to speak clearly and confidently. I have a problem where sometimes when I'm kind of presenting in this kind of aspect, I over enunciate, and that I think can be good and it can be bad. I guess that's kind of up to the person that you're with, but just really focusing on the pronunciation can help slow you down, because I especially have a problem with speaking too fast. And so I noticed even here in this conversation, I'm really trying to focus on slowing things down. And when I slow things down, then I over enunciate. And that's just kind of something to be aware of that you're doing, is to make sure you're being confident and clear and kind of slow down that speech, and so you don't appear nervous. And I think, and make sure that you have a strong introduction of yourself. It can be as simple as, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. Hi, my name is Moe Carpenter. I'm an AFC, which is an accredited financial counselor. It doesn't need to be more elaborate than that. It's just that simple, and that leaves them room to ask you more questions like, what does an accredited financial counselor do? Or other things to that aspect, depending on what the interview is in particular for. Something else to think about, and again, this is something you really want to think about before you get there, is to really combat the elephant in the room. And if an accessibility need comes up, make sure that you focus on just tapping on that topic and moving on. Something that I saw when I was researching for this is saying something like, I'm using a screen reader. So if you hear a pause in my speech, it's because I am working on my navigation to in my notes. And that way they know what's going on. You'd seem confident that you know what you're doing, and they know that you know what you're doing. And there's room and grace for those pauses, as people do usually give room for the accessibility needs as long as you know what you need. Oh, and another one I mentioned in my list was to mention I might not be making eye contact with you because I cannot see your eyes. And just if there's anything I can do to make that more comfortable to you as the interviewer, please let me know how I can best accommodate your needs for eye contact. Because as you know, us blind individuals don't often have good eye contact, and eye contact is really important in the visual world for a sense of connection. And so it's just something to really keep in mind, that other people get very nervous when others don't give them eye contact. So just addressing again that elephant in the room, that you might not be giving them exactly what they're used to, but you have ways to adapt to what they do need. And always smile when you go to talk, because your energy is very much related to your facial expressions. And so you just get so much more enthusiastic when you smile.
Annie has her hand up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Certainly
Hello, I haven't
can.
heard you in years.
Yeah, I know, it's been a while. Now this is a hypothetical, but anything is possible, and it sort of relates to the question of strengths and weaknesses, because we've been told so many mixed messages. Some people say, "Oh, don't talk about your weaknesses because, like, if you tell them you're sensitive, that's gonna, that'll raise a red flag." But suppose you go into an interview and somebody actually says, "You look nervous. Are you all right?" No, my instinct would be like, "Oh, no, 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 I'm fine," because it's like I've been told so many years, don't let them know that you're nervous, because that is a red flag.
Right. And that's where I'm like, some places say that it's a big negative to say that, and some other people say it gives you a connection and makes you more human. And so it really has to go with what you're comfortable with, because you want to be honest. And something I think for that particular thing, if you appear nervous and they're catching on that, you go, "Oh, why do you think I appear nervous?" And that way you have a way to flip it back to them, and they can say, "Well, you're doing this." And then you might be able to say, "Oh, well, this is actually because I have a disability. And so this is not, I wasn't aware that I was coming across that way. And so I can work on that." And that might be a way to kind of combat that with getting more information for yourself on things that you personally need to work on.
That certainly makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going into behavioral and situational interviews now, which is our second section of things here for job interviews. So basically, the question is, how can candidates use the STAR method effectively when responding to behavioral questions?
And so the STAR method, and again, I wasn't familiar with this particular phrasing until this evening, but I don't think it's a bad, and when I spell it out for you, the acronym, it's going to make a lot of sense. But it's really just taking apart a problem and really figuring out all the ways until you have the resolution or the result, and that's going to be R as result. But the first part is your situation. So S, situation, and that's just kind of what is the problem. So then T stands for task, and that's where you're going to explain your part in what the situation was. And then A is for action, and that's where you're really going to stand out by saying exactly how the whole situation, how you combated what happened. And so you're going to talk about all the action steps you used to solve this particular problem, or to come to a resolution for this particular problem. And then your R is result. And so what did you do? Or how did it turn out? So when you're looking at interviewing, this comes really into play when you're getting questions like, what would you do in this particular situation? And you're going to stand there and tell that you'll probably be given the situation, and that will really help you kind of develop how you answer how your task part of the situation. And they say that you really want to focus on how you go about resolving that particular situation. Does anyone have just a random situation out there they want to throw at me? And I can attempt to do one of these for us all.
By the way, Matt has his hand up.
Go ahead, Matt.
I did actually. I was actually thinking of this as soon as I came in here and heard y'all talking. So I've actually used this quite a bit
Awesome.
in interviews. Yeah. So it's really kind of goes back to demonstrating what you did in a situation, even if the result isn't a happy ending. Still demonstrating what you did can really help to show your skills, and especially some of those soft skills like communication and adaptability and that sort of thing. I definitely use this quite a bit. So I don't, you know, well, yeah, usually it's like people will say, so it's usually like these, they'll give you like a common situation in the workday, like, you're working with so and so and they're having a problem with this piece of their job or this task. What do you do, right? And again, it's not really about like solving so and so's exact problem. It's just about showing those soft skills and what steps. It always helps actually to think of, if you can, try to think ahead and think of um, some scenarios in your that you've encountered that you can talk about that help highlight your skills, right? And help highlight why you're a good fit for the position. So, all right, I'll shut up now.
You were good, Matt. Do you do any do you perform interviews at your job are you ever the interviewer?
No, no, I
Okay.
don't. I used to though. When I was in graduate school, I had an internship over in the Career Center, and we used to do mock interviews all the time with engineering students that were going out for co-op. They're interviewing for co-op opportunities and stuff.
So
And
I
so
need
we
to
do
send my
them
son your way. I
all the
got it.
time. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we did
My
a
son's
lot of
an
like
engineering student now.
reviewing resumes and getting them to talk about themselves and um that sort of thing. So yeah, so I definitely been on the other side.
A scenario I can think of is you were having a particular program and the main speaker has gotten under the weather and cannot speak, has laryngitis and physically cannot speak. And how would you go about solving that particular problem? And so your situation would be that you don't have a speaker. And so what is your task? It would depend on the role, but maybe you're the one who has to find the new speaker. Maybe you're going to be the speaker. And so those are just some different ways that the task can be at you. And so your actions could be something. If you are the one who needs to find, maybe you start going through your list of contacts and reaching out and seeing who is available on short notice to fill such a needed role, and figuring out what information they need to know to be best filled in for that particular event, and just things like that go along with it. If you have to be the speaker, like I got thrown into today, knowing just what the material is so that you can do some research and have some up-to-date information for people to share and know kind of the ins and outs of the programs that you're going into, because that will help you know the actions that you need to take, where you need to be, when you need to be there, knowing what equipment you need to have on hand so that you're able to participate. And the result is either you find a speaker, you don't find a speaker, or you become the speaker. I think those are a good way that we can do that star just kind of with this program today.
So
Not that
far,
that
we're
was the
holding up.
exact scenario, but something we can relate to.
All right, onward to our next question, and that is, what types of questions are asked by employers in this current, day and age, as far as interview questions are concerned? And I do think we've covered some of that. So is there anything you can think of it might be worth adding to that aspect as far as what types of situational questions do employers ask today?
What I had written down was you'll probably get asked questions like, what would you do if this other coworker isn't contributing? And so really developing a thought process to that kind of thing. That's a teamwork question, a problem solving. Oh, let me see what my notes said here. How to handle a deadline that you can't meet. I actually just listened to this fantastic podcast on this particular question. I think it was on Her Money, but I won't swear to that. It was about this particular question with deadlines and not making deadlines and how you actually can go. And what they had found was actually reaching out to the people and asking them, what can we take off your plate so that deadline can be met? Or what are the barriers to this problem keeping you from making this deadline? And now that would be from the employer side and not from the employee side. But if you could reverse that in your thinking and go, what can I get taken off of my plate so that I can meet this deadline? And then note that you can be retroactive to your employer and actually go out and reach out to them, or proactive, I guess would be the better term there. Reach out to that particular employer and say, this deadline I can't meet unless this happens. And so that way they're aware of what the problem is and that you've already gone through that. And so that's one of those ways that you could really combat that particular problem. And when you go into the interview, say things like that, like, I am good at identifying what the problems are the logistics to my schedule. And so I am able to find the individual things that I can move off of my plate and be able to put these particular deadlines on my plate. And if I still can't reach this deadline, I'm able to tell you what items will help me reach this deadline near that original due date and what that new due date can be. Another one is a customer service type question that might be the problem that they ask you about. And that is, if you have a client that's upset, how do you combat that? And I've done a lot of this within ACB Next Generation. When you deal with the public, you're always going to find a situation where somebody is not happy with how you handle the situation. And just remember, they're unhappy, not particularly at you, but at the situation because it didn't turn out the way they wanted it to. It's not really a personal attack on you. Sometimes it's really hard to remember that, but don't focus on the actual individual that's asking you or confronting you with the problem, but focus on the problem itself and how you can best resolve that particular problem as quickly as possible and with as little, I won't say as little effort, but with as little outward energy that they can see, because sometimes we just need to have that little fit in our own space. I personally wrote an email today and then quickly deleted it before sending it and rewrote it to a very simple process because they didn't need to know all the history and details that got me into that particular situation. They just needed to know that the problem was being resolved and that we were happy to work with them in the future. And that's as basic as it was when we rounded it off. But that is what you would bring to an employer, is that a customer service situation, that you are ready to combat those issues with hearing your client out and then working on a resolution that will best fit both the employer and the client, to try and keep the balance as equal as possible.
And Matt has his hand up.
Go ahead, Matt.
I promise I'm not trying to take up all your time. One thing I would add to this is if in the job description it mentions good gravy, a specific software program or like familiarity with office products or familiarity with Excel, you're probably going to get asked about that during the interview. So, that
Right.
that always, that's always going to happen. So be prepared to talk about that stuff.
And again, I don't know if you were here, Matt, when I did it. You can mention things like, I'm not familiar with that particular, or I've heard of that particular program. I have not personally worked with it, but I have worked with this other similar program, and I am happy to learn more about another program if that's how you honestly feel. If you have had issues and there's maybe an accessibility issue reason that you're unable to use that particular software, bringing it up there and having an alternate for them to look into might be another adaptation. And our next one was adaptability. So some ways that you can adapt your work process in order to meet the needs of the employer. And then making sure you work on the communication. That's another question they might ask you, is how do you resolve a problem if you don't have enough information, or if somebody gave you a task and you don't know what to do with that task. And so knowing how to go, which is the proper ladder of individuals to reach out to make sure that you're getting proper information and just that kind of thing. And that might even be a great way to ask them a question, is kind of flip it back to them. And what is the process that your particular business likes to see individuals use? So just remember that the employer is looking at your attitude and your problem solving skills, and not necessarily on the best correct answer, and how calm you stay under the pressure.
Yes, they're very observant, to say the least. As we continue on through the interview process, one of the questions you may get is how do you resolve or handle workplace conflicts and or challenges during your interview?
Right. And the things that I wrote down for that is make sure that, again, because I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that you're focusing on the problem, not the person, that you are staying calm and collected, and that you stay professional, and make sure that you know a way to explain yourself and as you work towards a solution to the problem. And make sure to highlight what you've learned at the end when you are talking about some problem solving that you have done on the job, that you want to focus on that action part of anything that you're talking about, but you want to hit that result before you close off any conversation that you are having on a particular item. Oh, and don't blame others. So if I had a situation that I didn't leave somewhere on the best terms, and I learned that the best way to really handle that situation was to say things like, we had a difference of opinion, because we did have very big differences of opinion. I don't think either of us are right or wrong. It's just we had difference of opinion, and to work the best in both interests, it was best if we went separate ways. And so that is something you will find really key, is to really not blame a particular individual and just focus on getting the problem solved. And remember to, when you talk about something, not to go into big details, and to keep it very concise and to the point, because the person, if you're getting the questions asked in an interview, this interviewer is not your therapist. They are not somebody who's there to hold your hand and say, it's okay, we're not going to do that to you at this job. And it's just that it's not the place for them. They don't need to know about the drama at another place. They don't need to know the situations that were going around. They need to see that you are beyond and above dragging someone else through the mud. And make sure to keep it from sharing your personal drama. I guess I kind of did that there. But like I said, it was just a situation where we just needed to part ways.
All right. So another question being here is how can one best keep your answers to any interview questions concise and to the point so that you don't start wandering around in the weeds, so to speak?
And
Because that's easy to do.
I am so guilty of this. I am somebody who feels like I need to explain everything because I know everyone hasn't lived my life experience. And so I feel like I need to explain all those things. But using that star, and like I said, once I probably spelled it out for you, the acronym, you're like, well, I know what that process is. I know how to state the situation, tell them the task, do the actions, and then do the result. And it's just a simple little process that will help you keep it short and concise. Really, in reality, you want to keep any particular answer to about 30 seconds to 90 seconds. And a lot of that has to do with our attention spans aren't the greatest. And so if you start wandering down one of those paths, the interviewer is going to get lost. They're not in your head. And so they're not going to know which direction it was supposed to turn. And so you just really want to make sure you keep it to about 30 seconds to 90 seconds. And that is not easy for a lot of us. So that's where that rehearsal is really going to come in handy, and just kind of really talking about things, but not being super exact. You want to make sure that you stick to the specific details that are being asked about the question. And it's always fine for you to restate the question that the interviewer is asking you to make sure that not only you understand the question, but it gives your mind a couple seconds to really think about an answer before you start giving an answer. And it's always great to pause when you do that, because a lot of times we think that silence is uncomfortable, but in a lot of these times, silence is the best way that you can really collect yourself and make sure that you're not going in those avenues of walking down the wrong direction. And make sure you avoid the long storytelling that we're all good at. And again, I'm guilty. I am so guilty of telling a long story. I'm sure Matt and Joey have seen my emails that go way too much in the wrong direction because I start telling a story instead of just keeping nice. But when you're in this interview process, you have to remember you are giving them maybe 15 minutes to a half an hour, and that's all they're ever going to see of you. So you want to make sure that you are showing the best part of you up front, and so they can see all the ways that you sparkle without having to see a lot of the parts that maybe aren't as sparkly about yourself.
And Annie has her hand up.
Hi again. It's interesting that you mention storytelling because I have recently read that it's often best to, rather than rehearse Googling most frequently asked interview questions, to prepare a story, as long as that story, like that you can condense that anecdote
right into
where
that
appropriate.
30-90 seconds.
Time yourself, yeah.
And that's the trick, is making sure that the story doesn't have too many twists and turns for that particular interviewer. And sometimes you'll be able to gauge a situation and see if a situation will allow a space for a longer storytelling. But some of that just comes with practice and just being comfortable in the skin that you're in so that you can give your best presentation up front. And just something, if you find yourself going down a story trail, you can always just cut yourself off and say, to sum it all up, or the key takeaway from the situation was. And you can even say things like, I'm sorry, I started going off. I just wanted you to really know that this situation has this result, and kind of cut yourself off from going too far into the weeds if you find yourself really starting to stray off there, because I know I do.
Like I say, it's not too difficult to do. That's for sure. As we progress on, another question that might be asked during an interview might be, how would you show someone leadership, how to be a leader that may have not had that experience before?
And so I kind of wanted to toss this question out to the group. And what are ways, if you don't think you've had leadership, like you don't think you've been in a role that's called leader, what are some other ways that you can express that you've had leadership without being a quote leader? Because I'm sure all of you here, as being a participant in the ACB community call, have had some experience that I can change into a leadership experience.
And Annie has her hand up.
Go ahead, Annie.
What I would say is, with regard to my workplace, I'm on a team in which we're often tasked with other projects besides being on the phone. So I have had the honor of planning monthly team meetings. Every once in a while, I'll volunteer to plan our monthly team engagement meetings, and I also did the honor of running a business meeting. My manager is very good about allowing employees the opportunity to run meetings, and I do that once every quarter or so.
Yeah, teamwork experiences, those scheduling is a great one. That was one of the last ones that my list mentioned, but that is a great one. Just that scheduling and producing a plan and agenda is a great way to show some of those leadership skills. I know that's something, as someone who's done a lot of committee meetings and being a chair of a committee, just getting that stuff is great ways to build some of those leadership muscles.
Yeah, just thank you, Mo, for joining us tonight. Great job. And to Diane for hosting. And to all of you who came and joined us tonight. We hope you were able to take a few tips and tricks from tonight's event to help you in your interview process adventure. And of course, if you'd like to learn more, just like Joey said, if you'd like to learn more about ACB Next Generation, to check out our website at acbnextgeneration.org. Or if you would like to give us a call, if you have any questions or whatnot, you can call 202-524-0909.
If you want to know more about ACB Next Generation and the work we're doing to empower the next generation of leaders in ACB, visit our website at acbnextgeneration.org.